Good afternoon. Welcome back to Market Wrap. I'm Sue Herera. Ted David is on assignment. A lackluster day on Wall Street as stocks once again followed in the footsteps of bond prices. With Memorial Weekend holiday looming and a lack of major economic reports to contend with, action was subdued. We'll have all the numbers in just a moment, but first, congressional sources confirm that President Clinton will renew most favored nation trading status for China when he appears before reporters at the White House in the next few minutes. The decision comes despite a mixed record on human rights progress in China in the last year. The announcement will allow U.S. companies to continue to expand in China without a fear of trade wars. You're seeing some live pictures there of the White House briefing room waiting for Mr. Clinton. But to pacify human rights activists, sources tell CNBC that the president will also slap high tariffs on Chinese guns and bullets imported to the U.S., establish a special human rights commission for China, and announce a new code of conduct for companies that do business in China, similar to the Sullivan principles for companies that did business in South Africa during apartheid. Peter Barnes has more on the story.
The decision is a major reversal for the president. As candidate Clinton, he sharply criticized George Bush for being too soft on China's human rights abuses. But American companies anxious to expand into the world's fastest-growing economy turned President Clinton around. They said continuing to link human rights to China's most favored nation trading status year after year would continue the risk of trade wars.
The fact is that American business and industry can't be expected to make massive investments, to spend a lot of time building commercial relationships with the uncertainty of annual renewals.
China is expected to spend $600 billion over the next 6 years building telephone networks, factories, highways, and other infrastructure. That could mean a windfall for U.S. companies and hundreds of thousands of new jobs the Clinton administration can take credit for.
As of this date, I don't see how the president could renew most favored nation status.
But the president's decision is sure to draw fire in Congress from human rights activists. Just last week, Representative Nancy Pelosi of California and other critics charged China was still using prison labor to make products shipped to America. In a last-minute concession, Beijing agreed Thursday to a U.S. demand to stop scrambling Voice of America broadcasts in China. But that was far from the top issue for congressional critics, who are standing by with legislation to impose tough sanctions on Beijing.
Thinking that MFN is a done deal is a little short-sighted. We will have a major debate on Capitol Hill.
Peter Barnes, CNBC Business News, Washington.
Boeing is reportedly close to sealing an offer from the Chinese government for more than 50 aircraft with a value of better than $5 billion. This as President Clinton decides probably to renew China's most favored nation trading status. As Alan Chernoff reports, plenty of other American companies have been negotiating with the Chinese.
New Jersey-based Thermometrics, a maker of medical devices, has 2 factories in Beijing and is in the process of completing a third. The company intended to go ahead regardless of President Clinton's decision on most favored nation status.
Political considerations aren't something that we try to get involved in. We were involved in commerce, and we were looking at the potential of the marketplace and the expansion.
Plenty of American companies have been doing the same, pursuing business opportunities in China in spite of the risk that the administration would try to punish China for its human rights record.
It is a new market, a very substantially growing market, and one in which American business would very much like to participate.
The fact is, major U.S. companies were betting that they'd win the fight, especially after the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Beijing lobbied Secretary of State Christopher during his visit to China. Major American companies pursuing Chinese business include AT&T, working on telephone contracts, Martin Marietta trying to strike satellite deals, General Motors negotiating to build subcompacts and minivans there, and IBM, which is embarking on a project to build communications networks in China. U.S. firms believed if they waited for President Clinton, the British, German, and Japanese would rush in to swipe business opportunities. But beyond the issue of most favored nation status, there are other business risks in China, especially with the nation's 89-year-old leader, Deng Xiaoping, believed to be in poor health.
If the economy and the political system and the society are disrupted, then work doesn't get done, products don't get bought, products don't get exported.
But American companies believe the potential for profit is well worth the economic and political risk in China. Alan Chernoff, CNBC Business News, New York.
Dow Component Boeing ending the day up 2.5 at 47, and Dow Component United Technologies also up by 5/8 at 65 1/2. Its jet engines division could be a beneficiary of that Boeing contract. Separately, the company announced late Wednesday that its Otis Elevator division signed a contract with Vietnam to install and maintain elevators in the northern part of that country. But investors are not happy with another Dow component today. Shares of Philip Morris, the most actively traded stock on the big board, ended down 3 1/8 at 50 5/8. This after its board took no action on splitting its tobacco and food businesses. This morning, the company released a statement saying that it will not take up the issue in the foreseeable future. Philip Morris's stock had been driven higher in recent weeks in anticipation it would divide the company to create more value for shareholders. And more bad news for Philip Morris and the tobacco industry. Florida Governor Lawton Chiles signed into law a bill that would give the state new powers to sue tobacco companies for the cost of caring for Medicare patients stricken by smoke-related illnesses. Trading on Wall Street today was slow, volume falling below yesterday's pace. The early stability in the bond market allowed the Dow to post a better than 15-point advance, but the market was unable to sustain the rally when bond prices lost strength. Here's a look at the final numbers from Wall Street. Down 184 on the Dow at 3753.46. New York Stock Exchange Composite Average down, up 0.55 at 252.61. 255.5 million shares changing hands. The advancers beat out the decliners, and 727 stocks were unchanged. The average share of big board common stock gained 7 cents today. In terms of new highs, 43, and we had 27 new lows. The Dow Transports up 485 at 1608.26. The utilities up 244 at 187.58. The more broadly based S&P up 0.72 at 457.06. The Amex index up 0.37 at 439.62, and the Nasdaq down 0.43 at 731.64. Bond prices initially gained strength on the back of yesterday's strong 5-year note auction, but Treasuries gave back the early advance on profit-taking before the weekend. The market will close early tomorrow for the Memorial Day holiday. The 30-year bellwether bond ending the day down 6/30 seconds at 86 23/30 seconds. The yield 7.36%. Lending early support to bonds today, signs that inflation concerns were easing, at least for the time being. The Commodity Research Bureau's index, which is a key gauge of inflation, continued its descent, falling below the 231 support zone. Traders say the index appears to be heading for a 2/3 retrenchment of its 5-week upward move, which would push that index down to the 225 to 227 range. A drop in coffee, copper, and cocoa responsible for today's downward move. The CRB index ending the day down 198 at 229.61. Drop in the CRB sent metals prices lower. Gold lost $2.90, silver off 8.5 cents, and platinum at the Merc lost $7.30 on the day. Also out today, the Labor Department reporting first-time filings for unemployment benefits fell 1,000 to 366,000. The less volatile 4-week moving average was up 7,500 to nearly 367,000, its highest level in more than 3 months. Well, it's official. Small investors reacted to the Federal Reserve's tightening moves in the past few months by slowing down purchases of mutual funds. Even so, it was the fixed income area that was really hit the hardest, and that's according to the investment company Institute. Small equity investors are a bullish group. Maria Bartiromo has the story.
Small investors are dumping out of bond funds in droves, pulling more than $1 billion out of their mutual fund accounts in April alone.
People just thought, well, if interest rates go up, there wouldn't be much impact on my total value. What they're finding is that their value is declining.
As interest rates moved higher over the past 4 months, bond prices have lost 14% of their value. At the same time, small investors are still putting new money into equity funds. New sales of stock funds inched up in April to more than $11 billion. That's not too far from last year's healthy levels.
The equity funds tended to be off in sales anyway, less than the income funds, and in fact, we were quite pleased with how they performed.
Overall, the decline in fixed income money sent total sales of mutual funds down for the 4th straight month.
But even though equity investors were among the more confident groups, analysts expect a fall-off in the months to come. They note that many retirement savings plans automatically move money into equities at the beginning of every quarter.
Still, sales of stock funds totaled $22 billion for the month. That's down from March's $29 billion in sales, but it remains more than 20% above a year ago. Maria Bartiromo, CNBC Business News, New York.
We are expecting to go live to the White House for President Clinton's announcement on China's most favored nation trading status. Just a little background for you. Mr. Clinton reportedly, according to congressional sources, will renew trade privileges for China without demanding further steps towards human rights improvements, and that is expected to stir some protests among human rights activists. Mr. Clinton's announcement would mark the end of a long process that began about a year ago when he issued an executive order saying renewal of MFN for China, under which its products enter on a really beneficial base. Let's listen to the president.
Today, I would like to announce a series of important decisions regarding the United States policy toward China. Our relationship with China is important to all Americans. We have significant interests in what happens there and what happens between us. China has an atomic arsenal and a vote and a veto in the UN Security Council. It is a major factor in Asian and global security. We share important interests, such as in a nuclear-free Korean peninsula and in sustaining the global environment. China is also the world's fastest-growing economy. Over $8 billion of United States exports to China last year supported over 150,000 American jobs. I have received Secretary Christopher's letter recommending, as required by last year's executive order, reporting to me on the conditions in that executive order. He has reached a conclusion with which I agree, that the Chinese did not achieve overall significant progress in all the areas outlined in the executive order relating to human rights, even though clearly there was progress made in important areas, including the resolution of all immigration cases, the establishment of a memorandum of understanding with regard to how prison labor issues would be resolved, the adherence to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other issues. Nevertheless, serious human rights abuses continue in China, including the arrest and detention of those who peacefully voice their opinions and the repression of Tibet's religious and cultural traditions. The question for us now is, given the fact that there has been some progress, but that not all the requirements of the executive order were met, how can we best advance the cause of human rights and the other profound interests the United States has in our relationship with China? I have decided that the United States should renew most favored nation trading status toward China. This decision, I believe, offers us the best opportunity to lay the basis for long-term sustainable progress in human rights and for the advancement of our other interests with China. Extending MFN will avoid isolating China and instead will permit us to engage the Chinese with not only economic contacts, but with cultural, educational, and other contacts, and with a continuing aggressive effort in human rights. An approach that I believe will make it more likely that China will play a responsible role, both at home and abroad. I am moving, therefore, to delink human rights from the annual extension of most favored nation trading status for China. That linkage has been constructive during the past year, but I believe, based on our aggressive contacts with the Chinese in the past several months, that we have reached the end of the usefulness of that policy, and it is time to take a new path toward the achievement of our constant objectives. We need to place our relationship into a larger and more productive framework. In view of the continuing human rights abuses, I am extending the sanctions imposed by the United States as a result of the events in Tiananmen Square. And I am also banning the import of munitions, principally guns and ammunition, from China. I am also pursuing a new and vigorous American program to support those in China working to advance the cause of human rights and democracy. This program will include increased broadcast for Radio Free Asia and the Voice of America, increased support for non-governmental organizations working on human rights in China, and the development with American business leaders of a voluntary set of principles for business activity in China. I don't want to be misunderstood about this. China continues to commit very serious human rights abuses. Even as we engage the Chinese on military, political, and economic issues. We intend to stay engaged with those in China who suffer from human rights abuses. The United States must remain a champion of their liberties. I believe the question, therefore, is not whether we continue to support human rights in China, but how we can best support human rights in China and advance our other very significant issues and interests. I believe we can do it by engaging the Chinese. I believe the course I have chosen gives us the best chance of success on all fronts. We will have more contacts. We will have more trade. We will have more international cooperation. We will have more intense and constant dialogue on human rights issues. We will have that in an atmosphere which gives us the chance to see China evolve as a responsible power, ever growing not only economically, but growing in political maturity so that human rights can be observed. To those who argue that in view of China's human rights abuses, we should revoke MFN status, let me ask you the same question that I have asked myself over and over these last few weeks as I have studied this issue and consulted people of both parties who've had experience with China over many decades. Will we do more to advance the cause of human rights if China is isolated, or if our nations are engaged in a growing web of political and economic cooperation and contacts? I am persuaded that the best path for advancing freedom in China is for the United States to intensify and broaden its engagement with that nation. I think we have to see our relations with China within the broader context of our policies in the Asian-Pacific region, a region that, after all, includes our own nation. This week, we've seen encouraging developments, progress on resolving trade frictions with the Japanese, and possible progress toward stopping North Korea's nuclear program. I am determined to see that we maintain an active role in this region, in both its dynamic economic growth and in its security. In 3 decades and 3 wars during this century, Americans have fought and died in the Asian Pacific to advance our ideals and our security. Our destiny demands that we continue to play an active role in this region. The actions I have taken today to advance our security, to advance our prosperity, to advance our ideals, I believe are the important and appropriate ones. I believe, in other words, this is in the strategic, economic, and political interest of both the United States and China, and I am confident that over the long run, this decision will prove to be the correct one. Tell them.
Mr. President, most of the conditions, the aspects of this problem were prevalent last year when you made very strong threats of a cutoff of human rights. Aren't you really bowing to big business and backing off of human rights in terms of the world perception?
No. No, I don't think so. And if you've seen the statements of recent days by many others, Senator Bradley and many other members of the Senate, other members of the American political community who have also evolved in their view, I think most people believe, number one, that conditions have changed. I think it's very important to say that under the terms of this agreement, some progress has been made. Some important political dissidents have been released. We've gotten information on Tibetan prisoners for the first time. We have a process now with operable deadlines for looking into these disputes over prison labor matters. We have at least an adherence, an explicit adherence by the Chinese to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have an ongoing set of negotiations now on how to deal with the jamming we've suffered on our Voice of America broadcast. So there have been some changes. And interestingly enough, many of the most vocal human rights advocates have argued that not that we should lift MFN status, but that instead we should have some intermediate sanctions which cover a bigger section of the economy. But things have changed to the point, both in terms of what has gone on in China and in terms of the other strategic issues. The situation in Korea, for example, I think everyone would admit is somewhat different than it was a year ago. That I believe that everybody believes we should do something differently. The question is, should we delink or should we continue to do this on an annual basis? I believe the answer to that is no. And I believe the answer to what we should do is to pursue a broader strategy of engagement. I think that is where we are now, and I think that it is far more likely to produce advances in human rights as well as to support our strategic and economic interests. Yes.
How do you answer those who say you are, using your own words now, coddling tyrants? And with the leverage of linkage now moved away, what incentive is there for China to improve human rights?
Well, let me turn it on its head, first of all. China is a very great and important nation. What gave rise to this MFN in the first place, this issue? Why did anyone believe that human rights should be tied to MFN in China as opposed to other nations in the world? The MFN law basically is tied to immigration. And we have, I haven't said that I don't think today, we have successfully resolved all outstanding immigration cases with the Chinese. Why was it extended to involve human rights here? Because of the frustration in the Congress that the previous administration had reestablished relationships too quickly after Tiananmen Square, and there seemed to be no other aggressive human rights strategy. The United States has pursued the cause of human rights around the world in many, many ways without tying it to MFN with those countries. I have had, for example, several conversations on this subject with one of our nation's most dedicated human rights advocates, President Carter, who strongly believes that the decision I have taken today is the right one and more likely to produce human rights progress. Because, let me answer your question precisely, every nation, every great nation, makes some decisions, and perhaps most decisions, based on what is in the interest of the nation at that moment in time internally. But no nation likes to feel that every decision it makes for the good, to do something that's right, that makes progress, is being made not because it's the right thing to do, but only because of external pressure from someone else. And I believe, based on and this is the root of this judgment, and all of you and all the American people will have to draw your own conclusions about whether I'm right or wrong, but I'm prepared to fight for my position in the Congress and elsewhere because I believe it's right. I believe, based on intensive efforts over the last few weeks, that we are far more likely to have human rights advances when it is not under the cloud of the annual question of review of MFN. That is what I believe. That is not to say that there will not continue to be human rights abuses in China, that there won't be ups and downs in this. But I believe that over the long run, we're more likely to make advances if there's more contact with the Chinese, not less. If there's more economic growth, not less. We saw that in Taiwan and Korea. And if we are free to explicitly and aggressively pursue our human rights agenda as we would with any other country. That is the conclusion I have drawn. I think it is the correct one.
Are you, on the first question, aren't you coddling tyrants just as you accused?
No, because I do believe what has happened since then. Has there been any progress? There's been so much progress that even the people who have supported these strong resolutions, the legislation in the past, are now arguing for a different course. I'm not the only person arguing that the time has come to take a different path. It's that they will say, well, I should have done something else. But virtually everyone says the time has come to move out of the framework. Now, we obviously have something going on in this relationship. Now, we obviously have a broader and deeper relationship, and we obviously are going to see some changes here. So I think everybody acknowledges that there's some dynamism in this relationship now which warrants a change. The question is, what tactical path should we take? And I expect that many people who criticize my decision will say, well, he should have put stiffer tariffs on something or another, or should have had a bigger section of the economy affected, or gone after the military enterprises or something like that. But I think nearly everybody recognizes that there has been some real change in this, and that we have the chance to move it to a different and better plane. And I think what I'm doing is the right thing to do. Yes.
President, on another topic, do you have anything to say about some of your staffers who apparently used government helicopters for golf outings?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I knew nothing about it until sometime during the business day. As you know, I've been working on this for the last couple of days. I asked Mr. McClarty to look into it, and I can tell you that, number one, I was very upset about it when I heard about it. Mr. Watkins has resigned, and the taxpayers will be fully reimbursed. That's the most important thing to me. The Treasury will not be out 1 red cent for whatever happened there. Now, I don't think there's anything else for me to say about it.
Will he pay that himself, or will you be paying that money from?
Well, I haven't resolved that yet. I just, like I said, I didn't even know about it. All I can tell you is, when I found out about it, I asked Mr. McClarty to look into it. Somebody else can give you more facts and more background. I've been working on this all day. I just know that Mr. Watkins offered his resignation, and I insisted that the taxpayers be reimbursed. Somewhere or another they will be, and we'll tell you how when we do it.
Mr. President, can I follow on that? Do you expect that there will be resignations from the 2 other individuals involved? Is that up to the Pentagon since they are in the military?
No, I don't know enough about the facts. I just haven't had time. I've been working on this China issue all day. I'm telling you what I know. The taxpayers will be made whole. There is a resignation. More facts to follow.
May I ask you a question about China, sir? Senator Bradley and others wanted you to do nothing that would restrict trade. Do you expect now that there will be some retaliation from China because of the ban on weapons imports, or some other lack of cooperation in our efforts to restrain the North Koreans, for instance?
I would hope not. I think this was an appropriate thing to do because it was discreet. It recognizes that there had not been complete compliance. It is plainly enforceable in ways that many of the other suggestions may not be. And I think that there are corollary benefits to the United States in this, which I think should be well understood by the Chinese. Many people have said, and I noticed it was reported in a news article in the Wall Street Journal this morning, that many of the manufacturers believe that a lot of these guns have come in below cost anyway, in ways that almost simulate high-tech Saturday night special phenomenon. So I think it is the right thing to do. I do not expect that to occur. I am plainly offering to build the basis of a long-term strategic relationship with the Chinese. We can work together when our interests demand it, and if there's progress on the human rights front, we can actually develop the kind of friendship that our relationship has seemed to promise at various times since the opening of China over a century ago. But that remains to be seen.
All right, you've been listening to President Clinton live at the White House, renewing China's most favored nation trading status, but breaking the link between human rights improvements and that trading status. Mr. Clinton says the best way to improve relationships with China is to continue trade. We'll be back in a moment.
This is CNBC.